Hello guys, this is your friend Naruto Audio Fanfics and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto Uzumaki was stranded on a deserted island? Naruto times Hinata times Sakura times Tsunade times Tamari times Yugito times Shion times Shizune Harem, Part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. This is in the Shippuden timeline, so Naruto and Hinata are already old enough for this sort of thing. Along with the first Naruto movie as well as a bit of a backdrop, and I am taking the filler episodes into account as well. The wind was howling loudly and the massive amounts of cold rain were getting worse as Naruto managed to keep on moving over the ocean, using the walk-on-water technique as he continued to move onwards. The ninja of Konoha was sent out by Tsunade on another mission to Snow to get a diplomatic message to the leader Kazuhana Koyuki. The message pretty much was to ask on an update on the situation in their region, pretty normal for the young ninja as he was looking forward to seeing his friend the princess, after not seeing her for so long. However, he was not working with his usual team for this mission. Sakura was currently working with Tsunade and Shizune on some new cases. Sai was too busy getting used to making friends, and the blonde was not in the mood for the silent boy's antics. He might not always get along with Sai, but they were at least not at each other's throats. Though how the rude Anbu was dealing with the amorous attention of Sakura's friend Ino was something that made him very curious. Kakashi was filling in for the deceased Asuma to lead Shikamaru, Choji, and Ino, and Yamato was also slated on another mission. Tsunade admitted that she herself had doubts of letting him go out on his own, but since he knew the leader of Snow Country personally and had been a friend to the princess, he was a better choice for this mission. That and the training he had received under Jiraiya had helped as well. Plus his growing arsenal of jutsus and his refined use of his old and still effective jutsu, the Kage Bushin, made him capable for it even more. Besides, after hearing that he was going to Snow Country, he jumped at the chance to see the princess again. The only company he had, apart from his current resident the Kyuubi, was Hinata Hyuga. The heir to the Hyuga clan had been the only one who could accompany him as the others were busy on missions as well. Hinata's cousin Neji was with his team of Rock Lee, and Tenten and Guy on another mission. Shino had family business to attend to, and Kiba was currently on a special errand with his family. Therefore, Hinata was the only one who wanted to ask if she could go with him. He didn't mind after seeing Hinata's skills and new jutsu, namely the one she used in the Baikouchu mission, and he knew that her Byakugan was more than helpful in this mission, just in case things got a bit hairy, though he made sure to protect Hinata as this would also be her first mission alone. She was a Hyuga, and the daughter of the current head and heir after all. The last thing he wanted was for Hinata to be harmed. He knew that she could stand up for herself, but she was a good person and a friend to him as well. Besides, he doubted that either Neji or Hinata's father Hiyashi was in the mood to find out she was harmed, and that was one thing he was not in the mood to happen. Of course, this didn't mean that he was blind to how much Hinata had changed since he had last seen her. She had grown a lot since then. It was only after a better inspection that he recognized her quickly before she once more fainted. He never could figure out why she always acted like that when he was around, which was why he was somewhat surprised that she wanted to go with him on this mission. But right now, he had other concerns. The boat they were taking had suddenly been hit by a massive storm while on the way back to Fire Country, and during the said storm, he and Hinata were helping the sailors when one of the sails was badly torn up by the fierce winds. However, before they knew what happened, a massive wave struck the ship and sent Hinata off the side. He quickly rushed into the waters to get her and he managed to save her. However, the waves had taken them away from the ship and here he was right now, walking on water and carrying the shivering Hyuga heir on his back, hoping that before they were knocked off the boat, that they were near land. Darn it, if I don't hurry up and find us a place to hide out from this storm, we're all in trouble. The container for Kyuubi moved on as fast as he could in the sea and it was then that his resident spoke to him via mental link. Hey Kit, if I'm not mistaken, there's a pretty large island just north of here. That's the best place right now. If you get there, it'll be a good spot to lay low for a while. You sure about that, Kyubi? Considering our situation, we all don't have much choice right now. Besides, the sooner we get out of this rain the better off we all are. Not to mention the girl with us, if she doesn't get dry soon, she'll suffer hypothermia. Naruto knew that as he could tell that Hinata was shivering and she kept on mumbling his name. With the Kyubi guiding him, the blonde ninja was relieved to spot the island that the Kyubi told him about. The island was very large and appeared to be filled with trees and small hills, plus several taller ones, and a mountain as well. The young man made his way there as fast as he could, and when they reached the island, he quickly began to search for any form of shelter from the storm and thankfully spotted a nearby cave. Wasting little time, he managed to reach the cave and put Hinata down on the floor, and in a place away from the wind that was now howling outside. NN Naruto-kun, it's so cold. Hang in there, Hinata, I'll do what I can. There's got to be a way to keep her warm. I know fire would help, but I can't leave her alone like this. Kit, use your chakra to warm her body up for now. How do I do that? They didn't teach you that in the academy. Were you? Oh, never mind, just follow what I say and she'll be fine. Naruto followed the Kyubi's instructions and began to use his normal chakra to spread warmth on Hinata's body slowly. His hands were moving over Hinata's wet clothes and form, and with some time, the still tired young teenage girl was not shivering very hard and seemed to be calmer. It's working, Kyubi, she'll be all right, won't she? For now, but we have to get her out of those clothes of hers, they are still wet, you'll have to take them off of her. Are you nuts? She'll clobber me if she finds out. Kit, she's unconscious and we have to get those clothes off of her either way, she can't stay in wet clothes or else she'll get sick. Besides, in case it might escape your attention, both of you are the only ones here on this island. But, no buts, Kit, either take them off or she gets even worse. The chakra warmth will be enough for now, but she still needs to get dry. Naruto sighed and began to take Hinata's trademark jacket off of her and then her pants and sandals, along with her kunai pouch. To his eternal relief, the Hyuga girl wore a thin bodysuit underneath the fishnet-style clothes that all kunoichi wore, and for that he was happy as he was spared the idea of seeing. Okay, best not to go there. I heard that, Kit, but we've got other things to worry about. We'll have to go out and get some wood and flint to build a fire. I'll keep you warm and I'll show you how to dry the wood and how to make a fire. But I can't leave Hinata like this. We're not going to be gone long, Kit. Now let's haul and get that firewood. Naruto reluctantly went out of the cave and began his search for any firewood on the island, and thankfully the place that he was in had a good supply of dead trees and dead leaves as well. The Kyubi instructed him to gather all that he could and bring extra wood to keep the fire going all night. As soon as he was done with that part, he made his way back into the cave and was happy to note that Hinata was still breathing and seemed all right. The Kyubi sensed her chakra and further assured his container that his companion was fine. She's fine, now let's get that fire started. Use the same trick I taught you before, but make the chakra hotter this time. The ninja did what the Kyubi asked, and sure enough, the wood was dry, and with the leaves as well. The leaves became the fuel as Naruto used his own kunai to start the fire with the flint he had been able to find. He then fed the fire and got a good-sized fire going. The cave was now lit in fiery orange and the heat was already beginning to fill the cavern. The Kyubi then told Naruto to use the leftover wood to make a hanger pole and hang his clothes to dry them, along with Hinata's. Naruto did that and soon his clothes and Hinata's were being held up to dry. He however insisted to the Kyubi he keep his pants on. The nine-tailed fox shrugged and then decided to tell the blonde ninja that now was the time to get some cover for himself and Hinata. The blonde was a bit confused, but the Kyubi was already issuing commands and he had to follow them for Hinata's sake. The duo went out, and with the Kyubi providing warmth and instructions, he was able to gather several large branches from the trees, namely the palm trees. As they went back, The Kyuubi then instructed Naruto to use the leaves to cover himself and Hinata, and he then told Naruto to make a bed of dry leaves and place Hinata to them to keep her warm. The young ninja did so and then thanked the Kyuubi for the help. The fox merely snorted and went back to sleep in the cage it was held in. Naruto gulped a bit and went closer to Hinata since he still needed to provide some warmth, though he was still hesitant about it. Hinata, however, was not going to be denied as she seemed to sense his presence, and she quickly moved closer to him and snuggled up to him and spoke in her still sleepy state. Naruto-kun, it's so warm now. Naruto gulped as he covered both himself and Hinata with the palm leaves and looked at her as she seemed to fall into sleep, as the warmth of the fire burned on. In the firelight, her pale skin seemed to take on a coppery hue and her dark hair seemed even darker, plus her face was more well defined by the flames. That and the fact that Naruto wondered why he was suddenly acting this way towards Hinata. He had always thought of her in the past as shy, timid, and weird, but those thoughts softened over the time he had spent with her, and he was already 15 nearing 16. His time growing up and training with Jiraiya for several years finally began to rub off on him as he began to appreciate the female form more. At times, even if he knew that it was Henge, he would look at Tsunade more intently, and also at Sakura since she had indeed changed a lot since he had last lain eyes on his old teammate. He even reacted the same way seeing Koyuki again, and he learned that it was a natural thing, but this was the first time he felt this way about Hinata. He, however, decided to put those thoughts aside for the moment as he felt sleep claim him. And before he knew what was happening, Hinata snuggled even closer to him as she began to dream her own personal dreams. Hinata awoke to the sounds of waves outside the cave, as she had been in a very lovely dream with her longtime crush Naruto, and it was so wonderful as it felt so real. She had dreamed that both her and Naruto were on an island and they were all alone, and she finally managed to tell him how she felt towards him, and they were. She opened her eyes and she gasped and blushed wildly as she found herself looking at the calm and sleeping face of her crush and very close to him. She couldn't help but stare at how peaceful her Naruto-kun looked right now, and a naughty part of her wanted to stay in her crush's arms, but her more innocent side told her not to. As she got up and looked out at the entrance, which was now in daytime, she began to recall just what had happened. She had managed to help one of the sailors hold onto the ropes when the tidal wave hit, and she had not been able to get a good grip and had fallen off to the side, but that was when she saw Naruto go after her, and when she hit the water, Naruto swam to her and carried her upwards, and all she recalled before she was made tired by the cold was being carried by Naruto on his back. Naruto-kun carried me here by himself. Hinata then noted that she was bare of her clothes, with the exception of her bodysuit and fishnet, and she blushed at the fact that her only form of covering was her bodysuit. She had noted how much she had grown over the past 3 years and a half since Naruto left the village to train under Jiraiya. She had been somewhat embarrassed when the others, including Sakura, Tenten, and Ino, pointed out how much she had grown, namely in the chest area, which was very much true, and she had gotten some stares from some of the younger men about that as well, further adding to her embarrassment. She was so deep in thought that she was not aware that Naruto was already awake and was looking at her as the sunlight was reflected back into the cave by the sea outside. Naruto noted how different Hinata looked in the sunlight, and he couldn't help but look at how different she seemed now. He got up and greeted Hinata with a smile as he normally did. "Morning, Hinata." Hinata looked and found herself staring at Naruto, and it was also when she noted briefly that he was half, and naturally, being the shy and timid young woman that she was, she quickly blushed and fainted. Naruto naturally got worried for her as she plopped back on the piles of leaves that he had used to act as their bedding. "Hinata, are you all right?" "She's fine, Kit. Just a little out of it, again." Naruto couldn't help but wonder just why the fox said that, and with such laughter as well as he could hear the fox laughing at him. What's that supposed to mean, Kyuubi? Ah, well, we'll talk about that later. In the meantime, we need to go forage for food. I can bet 10 to 1 you're starving, and so is that Hyuga girl. Before we do that, We might as well see if we can find any stream of fresh water around here. Why not drink the sea water? Naruto could have sworn he heard the nine-tailed fox do a face fault in the cage at that remark, and sure enough, the Biju was not amused by that remark in the very least, as it sent back a very sarcastic and annoyed reply. Kit, I know you're not that dumb. You should know that drinking salt water is a big-time stupid idea. When have you ever seen anyone in your entire life drink seawater? The two bickered a bit more as they went to look about and found a large river of fresh water that came from the mountain, and thankfully, the water was indeed fresh and moving as well, and cool no less. Thus it was ideal for drinking, cooking, and bathing. As soon as they did so, the Biju and the Jinchuriki went on to hunt and forage, with the Kyuubi teaching Naruto how to find edible berries and avoid the ones that were not good to eat for today and those that were not edible. As soon as they did so and took a good amount of the berries, the two then managed to find several healthy palm trees, and with the kunai he had, Naruto managed to climb upwards and get a few of the coconuts. That and the berries were enough for today, but the Kyuubi decided to help the ninja to hunt and catch some fish. The fish were fresh and seemed to be healthy condition, and that was enough. The Kyuubi then told Naruto to get a large stick, and with some vines, they were able to take their catches back to the cave. It was there that Naruto decided to ask the Kyuubi a question as to why and how it seemed to know all these things for survival. Hey Kyuubi, what is it, Kit? How come you know so much about these things? Kit, I've lived in this world for over 1,000 years, long before your village or your ancestors ever existed. You honestly think that I didn't learn anything else apart from destruction, death, and combat for that time? Give me some credit, Kit. Even if I am a malevolent entity with an appetite for death, combat, and destruction, I do have some other skills, you know. I see. Well, thanks. Without your help I don't think me and Hinata would be. Save your thanks, Kit. You are my container, and I rather doubt I'd like the idea of you dying early in this stage in your life. I did what I knew I had to do for my sake and yours. Thanks all the same. The Kyuubi laughed in its cage, and Naruto could tell it was having a cheeky, tooth-filled grin at him. Fine, you're welcome. Call me if you have any other things to take care of. Naruto then got the fire started, and he was happy to see that Hinata was very much awake again, and she helped him with preparing their food. The fish were cooked well enough, and the lovely smell of cooked meat filled the cave, and the two ninja dug into their food. The berries were sweet and juicy, and the two loved it, and they ate the fish slowly so as to enjoy the newly cooked meat. They then worked on breaking the coconuts and drank the fresh water inside of it. Naruto-kun. Naruto finished eating his fish and looked at Hinata, who was blushing at him, and she seemed to be rather concerned about something important. He wondered what that was about and decided to ask Hinata what was it she wanted to ask him. What happened last night? Naruto then began to tell Hinata about how she had been suffering hypothermia and he had to warm her up using his chakra. He then built a fire to dry their clothes, and keep them warm the whole night. All of which was very much true, as he had woken up on a few regular intervals to keep the fire burning and to check the clothes that they had with them to see if they were dry, not to mention check how she was doing. He quickly assured Hinata that he didn't do anything to her at all when she blushed bright red at the mention of him removing her jacket and pants. Hinata felt happy that Naruto had done all that for her and helped her out of the mess she had been in, and she promised to do her best to help him out while they were here. She then wondered on how they were going to find their way back to Konoha. Naruto-kun, how long do you think the others will find us? Naruto looked out into the sea and sighed. He wondered about that too. He hoped that the ship that they rode on made it back to port and was safe. If it was, then the sailors could send word to Tsunade Bachan that they were missing. Knowing her, she would do her best to find them and get them home. But if the ship had been too badly damaged, or worse, then he and Hinata would be here on this island for a very long time. He put that thought aside and kept his faith in the others back home and decided to help keep Hinata alive along with himself. I have no doubt they'll find us, Hinata, and I have no doubt that your father will do what he can to find you too. Why you think so? Naruto smiled and replied, I know so. Hinata smiled and agreed with Naruto as they finished their break fast. Later. Are you sure this island is safe, Naruto-kun? Hinata asked as she and Naruto left the cave to find out what they could about their island and see what they had to work with. The storm that had sent them overboard had pretty much passed on and the day was rather sunny and hot, normally ideal for beachgoers but not a comfortable thing to deal with for them right now. But they had to do it either way so as to know just where they were. They had taken stock of their tools earlier and thankfully, all of their kunai were still with them, along with several extra shuriken that they could use when the time comes. However, to Naruto's disappointment, he had lost his summon scroll for his giant shuriken and would have to get a new one to replace it once he was back in Konoha. His wallet was still with him, and thankfully he had a waterproof wallet at that. However, money was worthless in a place like this island and he missed eating ramen already, but pushed that aside in order to focus on what they had to do. The only way to know is if we look around Hinata. Come on, we can get a drink in the river nearby, the water's pretty nice there, cool and clean too. Hinata smiled and they arrived and true to Naruto's words, the water was cool and clean and refreshing to the two of them. They then began to explore the beach once more and found small areas where tidal pools had been made, and they saw different types of fish, both big and small moving about, along with other marine life. As they carried on, they decided to stop near a coconut tree and take some of the coconuts that were green and fresh looking down. As soon as they were able to get the water inside, they were able to drink and as well as they should as the heat was really something at midday. Wow, it's hot out here. Naruto said as he was forced to take off his black and orange jacket and tie it to his waist, while Hinata was blushing once more as she saw that the sweat that Naruto had on him allowed his dark white shirt underneath to cling to his body. She couldn't help herself as her eyes began to wander on the strong and hard-looking muscles that was on Naruto's chest, shoulders, arms, and torso, and she then looked at his face as he wiped the sweat from his face. Wow! Naruto-kun. Naruto-kun looks so strong, so handsome. Hinata then realized that she was now having naughty thoughts that began to fill her mind and it was also then that she noted that all the time she was looking at him without any modesty, he was looking back at her, very concerned. Hinata, are you alright? Do you have a fever or something? Your face is so red. Hinata tried not to lose herself as Naruto began to close in towards her, his concern for her well-being in his deep sky blue eyes. The same eyes that haunted her dreams every night when she went to sleep. She wanted to do something, anything right now, but her feelings for Naruto were so strong now that she couldn't help herself as she sat there frozen. In truth, she was fighting the urge not to lash out at him reflexively or to faint either. Don't faint. Don't faint. Don't faint. The moment Naruto placed his hand on Hinata's forehead to check her temperature, she quickly fainted, making Naruto once more panic and try to wake her up, but Hinata was totally out of it and as she didn't respond to any of his cries for her to wake up, she was still out cold. Naruto was in a panic. He hoped that nothing bad had suddenly happened to Hinata, and despite his growing discomfort with the idea, he placed his hand on her chest, to find out that her heartbeat was fine and she was alright. However, it was also when he noted that his hands were too close to Hinata's, which he knew had grown a lot since he had last seen her. He then felt this strange feeling of attraction in the pit of his stomach as he looked at Hinata. Why the heck am I feeling this for Hinata? It's natural, Kit, there's nothing wrong with that. Actually, I was beginning to wonder just when you were going to finally get attracted to her anyway. What the heck is that supposed to mean, Kyuubi? The fox couldn't help but shake its head at the sheer amount of naivety that his container had. Like everyone else in the village of Konoha, the nine-tailed fox knew quite well on the crush that the Hyuga heiress had on his container. And truth be told, it provided him with a measure of amusement while he was stuck in the young man's body. He found it rather funny at how oblivious the young blonde was to the mountain-sized crush the young woman had on him. But at times, it did get annoying to him that Naruto was like a block of cement when it came to Hinata's affection. Of course, he knew about Naruto's attraction to Sakura Haruno, and while he was impressed with how determined Naruto was to protect his teammate, he didn't think that they would be a good couple for a while. Though the relationship between the two had grown somewhat, he was still convinced that the Hyuga heiress was a better choice for his container. Besides that, he believed that Naruto and Sakura were better off as friends. He didn't disapprove of Sakura, considering her healing abilities were good and so was her strength in combat, not to mention her growth as well. The nine-tailed fox then decided to test the waters, so to speak, as he then spoke to Naruto. Let me put it this way, Kit, she likes you, a lot if I might add, and she's becoming even more attracted to you. Now the reason why she just decided to take a nap is because she's very much trying not to faint at you being close to her, since you have quite the effect on that white-eyed girl, and for a very long time since you both were younger. Ain't first love grand? Naruto was stunned at that announcement. He had always considered Hinata as a good and kind person for a very long time, after he had seen her stand up for herself against Neji all those years before. Back then he thought she was a weird, timid, and quiet girl, but he liked her for being a kind, strong, and generous person. He then recalled the times she would seemingly step out of her timid nature to help him on. He then spoke to the nine-tailed fox. How can I be sure you're not pulling me by the leg? There's no way Hinata would ever like someone like me. HMPH. Kit, you have no idea how wrong you are. She's always had a crush on you ever since you were still in the academy, and she might not say it, but she's always tried to support you from the shadows. She's just too shy to say anything to you point blank, but she does try to show you how much she likes you, or have you forgotten those times already? Naruto then thought back at the times Hinata was by his side and then recalled that every time she had been close to him, she would blush bright red, and it was then that he began to realize how much Hinata acted around him. But he still doubted that she would like him, considering his resident inside of him. I doubt she'd like me, Kyuubi, as soon as she find out about me, right? You do have a good point there, but that's up to her, Kit. She had those feelings for you for a very long time, so it's entirely up to her if she will stand by you once she finds out about me, and it's naturally up to you if you're going to tell her someday. By the way, I recommend you do take off the jacket she has, before she suffers heat stroke. In a place like this, heat stroke's a pain to suffer. And crush some of the coconut meat so you can get the oils. If I recall right, the oils are good sunscreen. Oh yeah, she's waking up right now. Hinata woke up and saw Naruto looking at her with concern and realizing that she had fainted yet again and apologized as she then took off her jacket, even as she blushed at the idea of being in her bodysuit before Naruto. She then followed Naruto's actions of crushing the coconut meat and using the oils to shield themselves from the sun. Afterwards, they went on to hunt and forage for food around the beach and into some of the forested areas of the island. Later near the beach, they were able to harvest several coconuts, some fish, berries, herbs, wild vegetables, some wild birds, and rabbits as well. As soon as they got the fire going, they built some shade in the sun and cooked their lunches, removing the scales of the fish with their kunai, and skinning the rabbits and then removing the bird feathers. As they finished cooking their food properly so to avoid food poisoning, they looked at the beautiful beach before them and the warm air and began to eat their food. Naruto wished that he was able to get supplies from the ship, but the blonde was thankful that the food was all right and at least he had company as he then looked at Hinata who ate her food daintily, still not sure whether to believe that what the Kyuubi told him was true. Hinata came from a noble clan and no doubt would have been asked to marry a good shinobi of her father's approval. There was no way she could ever be asked to marry someone like him or even like him. But as he thought about the times he had been close to her, she seemed kinder and more friendly around him despite her shyness, and now that he thought about it, he actually was beginning to find her times of blushing to be rather cute. But still he doubted that her father Hiyashi would ever approve of him being close to Hinata, and no doubt Neji would beat the living tar out of him if he tried to make the moves on his cousin. He put that aside and they began to talk about things while they watched the beach and the gentle waves go by. Hinata asked him shyly what happened to him for the past 3 years ever since he left the village, and he asked how she had been. He was surprised to hear about how things had changed for Hinata while he had been away. She and Neji were friendlier to one another now. She was in good terms with both her father and sister, and that was good thing to know for him. As he told her about his own travels with Jiraiya, she blushed and laughed at some of the funny things he told her, and she also seemed eager to hear about his adventures for the past few months after they had worked together. As the day wore on and they finished their lunch together, they decided to go for a bath in the river. Naturally, Naruto left Hinata to take her bath in private. There was no way he was going to peep at Hinata. She would not like it in the least if she caught him peeping at her. Hinata enjoyed the cool water as she bathed while Naruto stayed a good distance away, but close enough to protect the Hyuga heiress as she bathed. However, it was indeed tempting for him to try and look at Hinata, and the Kyuubi certainly wasn't making things any easier as the perverted words of the Kyuubi filled his ears, along with some rather interesting images as well. Naruto clamped hard to silence his resident from his mind and was relieved that Hinata was done with her bath and allowed him to take his own. Hinata also was tempted to look at Naruto while he was bathing but thought better of it. She didn't want her crush to think she had become a pervert, though the desire to see just if the muscles she saw before were real. She wondered if Naruto had been peeping at her, and while a normal woman would have been ready to pound the offending man hard on the head, she was tempted to show herself to Naruto without him knowing that she knew that he was looking. But for now, she decided to take the time to check her clothes and to remove any leftover traces of salt in since the salt would rot their clothes. She also made sure to take a look at Naruto's clothes when she had the chance. As soon as Naruto was done and they were fully dressed, both him and Hinata, the Hyuga girl approached her crush and spoke out her intent to clean their clothes of any salt that might be on them. Not only would it prevent their clothes from rotting, but also prevent them from being irritated by the salt. Naruto-kun, I need to, clean our clothes in the river. Naruto looked at Hinata as she was once more trying to avoid looking at him directly, and this time he saw the red in her face. Even though he was still not sure if he could believe what the Kyuubi had told him, he decided to get to know Hinata more to see if it really was true that she actually liked, or more, love him as what the nine-tailed fox said. Sure. Give me a minute. Naruto then took off his jacket and was now in his white undershirt and then handed it to Hinata and told Hinata that he would clean his pants himself. Hinata nodded as Naruto then went off to find food for their dinner. As she cleaned the clothes, she suddenly recalled her dream about her and Naruto being alone together and her getting the chance to finally tell him her feelings towards him. But the question on her mind was how she was going to accomplish that. But she was very afraid as she washed Naruto's jacket. She was afraid that Naruto would not say anything and deny her long-time affections for him, and that hurt more than any of the pain she had felt in the missions, because Naruto's denial and refusal of her feelings would be a wound in her heart. No, I have to be strong, I have to know how he feels about me. I have to, because I might never get another chance like this. Later, as she finished cleaning Naruto's clothes and her own, the white-eyed Hyuga met up with Naruto, who managed to find more food, in the shape of berries, fruits, nuts, fish, and even a wild pig. The two worked hard and cleaned themselves up after they were done cleaning their food near the river. As they were done and cooked their food as the sun set, they took the time to watch the sun set down and then began to eat their food, all the while talking about their respective travels and missions before they met each other again. As night fell, Hinata used her Byakugan to look for any sign of incoming ships at the edge of her line of sight. She had been perfecting her skills with the Byakugan under her father's training and that of her cousin Neji as well, and though she still couldn't see very far, it was enough. They then gathered a lot of firewood to make a signal fire, since once Hinata would catch sight of a ship, he could light the signal fire and they would be rescued. With that done and the fire fully protected and a good supply of fuel nearby, they made their way to the cave and made use of the rabbit skins they had with them. They were able to use the skins to make coverings for their bedding of leaves and to make it a bit more comfortable. As they were about to go to sleep, Naruto made the warming fire for them, and when he was sure that the fire would burn for a long time to keep them warm for the night, and he kept a kunai close at hand to defend himself and Hinata, just in case. Once he was done, both he and Hinata went to sleep, and unlike before, when Hinata, who was fast asleep due to being tired, would suddenly reach out in her dreams, he decided to let her hold him, in an effort to keep her happy, and as he also went to sleep, he began to find that feeling Hinata's sleeping form next to his own was nice. In the back of his mind, in the prison that held the Kyuubi, the nine-tailed fox couldn't help but snicker at what he was seeing. The next day, the two stranded ninja then began to get into a routine. When they woke up, both of them hunted and foraged the island for food and water, along with keeping themselves clean and ready for rescue. When there was enough light, Hinata would use her Byakugan to look at the horizon to see any ships nearby, while Naruto would keep the signal fire ready for lighting and replaced any wet fuel and firewood with fresh fuel and allowed the wet firewood and fuel to dry out and to be used again. If Hinata didn't find any ships, then they would immediately work on getting their food and drink for their meal, along with deciding to train while they were on the island to have something to do. Hinata learned the Kage Bushin technique when she was in the academy, and under Naruto's direction, she was able to use several of her own clones to train herself to better her use of the Byakugan and her taijutsu, while Naruto trained with thousands of his own Kage Bushin to keep himself at the top of his own game. Naruto had learned about the memory technique associated with Kage Bushin and used the skill well when he trained, making sure to check himself for any mistakes with his own fighting style. Once they were both done with their training a few hours later, they took the time to rest and clean up with a quick dip into the sea and then washed up in the river, enjoying the cool waters from the mountain on the island. As soon as they were done, they cooked their food and ate their lunch. As they did so, they mostly kept away from the sun while using the oils from the crushed coconut meat to keep themselves from getting sunburned and heat stroke as well. All the while Hinata began to slowly become more open to Naruto and told her more about herself as she realized that the only way she could ever become closer to her crush was to be more forward to him. She hoped that what she was doing was all right, and she was happy that Naruto would talk back to her, but one question, apart from his feelings towards her, lingered in her mind, and was the question of why he was always being treated with suspicions by the other villagers for a long time. Even though they became more accepting of him, there were still those that mistrusted him. She never knew why this was the case. Naruto was already a highly skilled ninja and such a kind-hearted young man, why do others still treat him badly? However, she was still too shy on the subject, just as she was still too shy about asking him his feelings towards her. But she was willing to try. Naruto himself marveled at Hinata as they spent time together. He began to wonder at just how strong Hinata was now, compared to her past self. Sure, he still thought of Sakura while they were together, but his normal thoughts about being intimate with Sakura were being replaced by thoughts of being with Hinata. He began to look at Hinata and she seemed to grow even more attractive to him as well. He was however still cautious as he was still not sure about the truth about her supposed feelings towards him. The two ninja continued to concentrate on looking for any passing by ships, and they continued to train with their respective skills and weapons. Until Naruto decided to ask Hinata a favor. Hey Hinata, can I ask you for a favor? AAAFFF favor. WWH what SS sort of favor? Naruto-kun. Naruto saw the bright blush on Hinata's face and her twiddling of her fingers, and he finally found her actions to be very cute and nice to see. He however decided to keep himself objective and decided to ask Hinata what he had in mind. Would you like to spar with me? Hinata gasped at that. SS spar with you? Sure. I want to see how much you've grown, Hinata, and now is as good a time as any before dinner, but only if you want to. Okay, you don't have to do it if you don't want to. Hinata nodded and replied as she knew that she should see just how Naruto had improved as well, and maybe see if she could improve while sparring with him. She took that thought to mind and slowly got into her normal combat position and activated her Byakugan. I'll try, I'm ready. Naruto nodded as he could tell that Hinata was ready for their sparring match and they began to fight one another. Naruto tried with a few straight punches and tried a spinning heel kick in mid-leap, aiming at Hinata's head, but Hinata ducked and retaliated with her own kick, forcing Naruto to block with his own hands and move back avoid several of Hinata's attacks using the gentle fist style of her family. He knew how dangerous that style, recalling his fight with Neji before and did his best to evade, or if not, he blocked them, but was careful to keep his distance. As they continued to move and fight, they were so engrossed that they didn't notice the heat of the sun and as it began to set as well into the horizon. Hinata had to admit that she still needed to improve on a few aspects of her gentle fist as she dodged and blocked some of Naruto's kicks and punches and she was amazed at how fast he could move. When she had seen him fight in their missions together, he wasn't as fast as he was now. Naruto himself admitted that Hinata has certainly improved since he had last seen her fight as he avoided her attacks which were moving a lot faster than before and certainly were harder to avoid this time around. But he liked that. She had certainly changed from the shy girl that he knew years before. He was able to outpace her a bit in terms of speed, but she was certainly a lot faster than him. The two continued their sparring and were looking at one another carefully to assess each other's speeds and abilities as they began to get to their stronger attacks. Plus, this allowed them see each other at their best and it was quite a sight for both of them as well. It was once said that when in combat one sees things in their foe that can tell him or her a lot about the opponent, and this sparring match was no different. Hinata saw how determined Naruto looked as he fought and she was amazed at how handsome he was when he was at his best. She always admired him from afar and now she was getting to see him in action herself as they continued to trade blow after blow and evade or block each other's attacks. And like any normal girl in front of her crush she was feeling very happy. Even though she was still determined to show Naruto her growth as a kunoichi, still she felt hot as she watched him move and her imagination began to play with the images on the back of her mind on how those muscles would move as they fought on. Naruto also noted how attractive Hinata was when she was fighting with all of her skill and determination, and he admitted to himself that she looked very much at her best as she continued to trade blow after blow with him. She looked very much an attractive woman as they moved and fought with one another with each blow as he too was determined to see just how much Hinata had changed since he had last seen her and worked with her all those years before he went to train under Jiraiya for 3 long years and from what he was seeing now, she had changed, not to mention he began to look at her form even more, and even when he did it to determine her moves he couldn't help but wonder how she looked without. Both sparring partners shook those thoughts out of their minds and focused on their match as the day wore on. And when night finally set in, both were tired and decided to call it a day. They however had plenty of leftover food and were able to reheat the cooked food and ate their remainder for their dinner and Naruto complimented Hinata. "Wow, you've really gotten stronger Hinata. I had a hard time just managing to try and hit you. You really must have been training hard since the last time we worked together." "TT thank you. I wanted to get stronger, just like I promised." Naruto smiled at that as he saw how cute Hinata was when she blushed and twiddled her fingers. "Well, you've kept your promise and I think that you'll be a great ninja in a few more years' time." Thank you." As the two of them watched the moon rise over the sea and cover sea with a silvery glow, they then wondered just how things were at Konoha while they were here. And they once more decided to go back to sleep in the cave, with Naruto making the fire to keep them warm for the night and they both went to sleep. The next day, no sign of a ship Hinata. Naruto asked as he checked the fuel for their signal fire on the early morning once the two of them were awake. He had decided to later see what else they could find on the island on this day as they had only explored a portion of the place, plus he might find some stuff that could be useful for them while they were still here. Hinata was using her Byakugan as she looked at the horizon and shook her head sadly. "No, I don't see any ship yet. I hope they find us soon Naruto-kun." "Don't worry, they will. Come on, let's go see the rest of this little island of ours." Hinata blushed but nodded as she followed Naruto to explore their little island. The two began to consider this island their own personal place as they stayed here for 3 days now and they wanted to find out anything about the island they were staying in until they were rescued. For the first time, Hinata was not fainting as she held her crush's hand as they both went to see the rest of their island, and saw large patches of flowers nearby, some that were safe and others that were poisonous. There were large trees everywhere and the hills naturally had fields of green grass over them, along with some of the hills being bare of any coverage. They arrived at the mountain and decided to leave that island alone for the time being as they looked about and spotted other animals in the area, namely wild pigs, rabbits, birds, and more as they looked about. They wondered why such a lush and bountiful island was not inhabited at all, but they found no sign of any habitation and any underground bases in this island at all. It was a perfectly deserted island and they were here for the time being until they were found. The two decided to take their time to explore the island and enjoy the solitude as well as this allowed them to relax a bit more in the feel of the cool breeze as it came from the high mountains, that no doubt had snow on the top of it. As they arrived at the hill that overlooked the whole island they watched the place and surveyed the island. This island, it sure is a nice place to be in, right Naruto-kun? Yeah, makes me wonder why no one decided to build a small home here. This place would have been a good retreat. The two ninjas sat down on the fresh grass and took in the beauty of the island and took the time to think about other things just for today. Naruto was still intent on finding Sasuke and bringing him back to Konoha. While he knew that Sasuke was still after his brother Itachi, he wanted to make sure that his former teammate was safe and would at least, after he did deal with Itachi, he would come back home, though how that was going to happen and when was beyond him, but he kept hoping. For now, however, his thoughts on the matter were now being joined by his thoughts on Hinata and he began to think back on the times he had known the Hyuga girl. He began to recall the times they had been together, from the Chunin exams, to the missions he had been with her, and when they had worked together to find Sasuke one time, and in each instance he began to see that Hinata indeed cared for him and was really a great friend, and also, maybe more, but he still was not sure how to tell her about his resident guest. They then foraged and hunted for their food and after they were done, they cooked their food and began to have breakfast. As they ate, Naruto then decided to at least talk to Hinata to finally answer the question that he had about if she did have feelings for him in a very important sense. But he made sure to put that off until he was ready, for now he wondered how things were at Konoha. Back in Konoha, the situation in the hidden village of the Leaf was far from perfect as the rains that fell on the village kept everyone indoors, and the storms that were there were really making movement hard. And one particular situation made things a heck of a lot worse for the people involved. In the Hokage's office. Damn it! When will this blasted storm clear out of here already? Tsunade was furious as she looked at the latest weather report and the fact that it was still unsure just when the storm would end and the skies would be clear and the sea safe enough to send out a rescue party for Naruto and Hinata. The Godime was not very happy at least 2 days before when she had been told that Naruto and Hinata were lost in a massive storm that hit the sea and their ship that was already bound to return to port. In fact, she had been outright worried sick for Naruto and Hinata. She might have a brave and tough front and always being critical and serious, but she does show deep sympathy for those close to her, and most of all for Naruto, which was far from surprising as Naruto had been the one who broke her free from her past and allowed her this chance to make things right for herself and to honor both Dan and Naoki. Naruto reminded her greatly of the two most important people in her life, and the thought of not being able to find him, all because of the fickle weather, was already eating away at her patience. Hinata had already improved well from before, and like everyone else who knew Hinata in any degree, she knew that it was due to Naruto that the former shy and quiet genin had reached the rank of Chunin, and had helped ease the tensions between both Hyuga families, and that was a good thing as well. She knew that others were also worried about the fates of the two missing people. And even the villagers wondered just where the two had disappeared to and when they would be coming back. Already various types of rumors were circulating about their fates, and some of the rumors were either mildly or hysterically humorous and cute, to downright wrong and far-fetched. Everyone in the village, including her knew about Hinata's long-term crush on the blonde loudmouth ninja and container for the Kyuubi, and even though she had her doubts about Naruto finding out about the Hyuga heiress crush on him of all people, she couldn't help but wonder at the possibility that while they were alone together, he might finally get the message, but considering how dense the blonde ninja was at times, that might not happen. She sighed as she looked out once more at the dark sky over Konoha, and at that same moment, Jiraiya walked in, along with Shizune the perverted hermit sage, trainer of Naruto, and naturally her only remaining teammate now that Orochimaru had died after Sasuke killed him, sighed as he also looked out to the rain. Still no change. Not a damn thing. The storm over the entire fire country's still too dangerous for any ship to go out right now. The perverted hermit side was also worried about Naruto, not just for the fact that he made a promise to train the boy, but to make sure that Akatsuki never got their filthy hands on him and the Kyuubi. He didn't want his former student Namikaze Minato and Kushina Uzumaki, who were Naruto's parents, even if they were dead, to think that he was going to let their son die out there alone. The only silver lining the perverted hermit could see was the fact that Hinata was with Naruto. Like everyone else, the perverted ninja knew for a fact that Hinata had a mountain-sized crush on his star pupil, and he was eager to see if Naruto would finally get it on with Hinata. He had nothing against Sakura, and he knew for a fact that despite her temper with Naruto's perverted nature on occasion, she cared for him too much to let him be harmed, now that she knew the secret burden he had carried all his young life. However, despite the closeness the two had, he doubted that a very serious relationship would spring between the two. Friendship between them was enough for now. He then smirked a bit and spoke. I know for a fact that Naruto is safe and alive, and with him taking care of Hinata, things are going to get interesting indeed. What are you talking about this time? I'm thinking that maybe the two of them, well, you know what I mean by that, so why should I explain that to you? Tsunade got up her desk and glared at her perverted teammate. Even if she was entertaining the idea herself, she still doubted that Naruto would actually notice Hinata crush on him, even more so that Naruto and Hinata would even consider eloping. Are you trying to be funny, Jiraiya? There is no way that will ever happen between them. And how can you be so sure about that? Tsunade glared at her teammate and fellow Sannin with a glare as the two of them were getting ready to butt heads with each other over something. They had done it many times when they were still kids and when they were already grown-ups as well. Shizune also knew that to be true, and she was already standing aside as her mentor and her teammate began to glare at each other. There is no way that Naruto would ever decide to make the moves on Hinata. He's still too dense to even notice that she's head over heels in love with him, and you know it. Oh really? Well then I say that you're wrong. There's no way what you have in that perverted mind is going to happen at all, Jiraiya. Really? Care to bet on that? Tsunade was wary about this sort of thing as she had betted a lot of times and lost, but she also knew that if she ever won, something bad was going to happen. She knew that to be true as she had won the lottery on the day that Gaara had been kidnapped by Akatsuki, and that told her that something had gone wrong, and she was right as she had dispatched Guy and his team to aid Naruto and the others. And the help came right on time, as well as they were able to help Naruto greatly. Even if Gaara had died, he had been brought back to life by Chio and Naruto, and that was enough. Fine then, I'll take that bet. I bet that if I am right and Naruto and Hinata don't elope, you don't get to peep at any of the women in Konoha for the next 6 months. Fine, and if I win, then I get to do my research uninterrupted by either you or the Anbu for the next 6 months as well. Deal? Deal. Elsewhere, in the Hyuga residence, a lot of things were happening as many servants and family members were deep in their work. Some, however, were praying for the safe return of Hinata back to Konoha. They had grown quite close to Hinata and fond of the heiress, including Hanabi, Hinata's younger sister. She had begun to idolize her big sister, and she was the one who would always ask when they could go out and find her big sister. Hiyashi was not very happy with these turns of events, and he hoped that the storms would pass soon so he could be reunited with his eldest daughter. He had long ago treated Hinata the way he did, not because he didn't love her, but because her kind and shy nature, plus her tendency to give up in the past made her very vulnerable. In fact, he had been keeping tabs on Hinata for some time, even without Kurenai's knowledge, as he wanted Hinata to grow and be strong, but despite his actions and attitudes towards her, she didn't seem to have that drive to become stronger. Until Naruto Uzumaki came into her life, that is. He, like all the elder ninjas, knew about the nine-tailed fox in the young blonde ninja, which was sealed into him by the fourth Hokage. Like the others, he followed the order of the third Hokage to never tell anyone in his family about what happened, and he naturally had a healthy amount of fear for the demon. But he had to admit that the young boy who was the container for the nine-tailed fox was far from being the demon others thought him to be. He, however, noted the very strong effects Naruto had on his daughter Hinata. He would have not allowed her having a crush on him had he not noted that Hinata began to train herself harder every day to try and impress both him and Naruto, but even then, she didn't have the courage to stand up for herself, and she nearly was reduced to tears by Neji when they fought against one another. It was only when Naruto told her to stand up for herself that Hinata fought with Neji seriously, and while Hinata had lost and nearly died, she had apparently gained the strength, acknowledgement, and support she needed to finally push herself to achieve and strive for the best. He noted that very well, and despite not showing it, he approved of her change of attitude, and after the Baikouchu mission, he was happy that she was now more confident in herself and was willing to fight real opponents and to strive to make herself truly a Hyuga. That also allowed him to finally be a father to her, and thankfully, their relationship had been mended, all because of Naruto. It wasn't just his daughter who was changed by Naruto, but his nephew Neji as well. Long ago, he had been at odds with his twin brother Hisashi, Neji's father, since Hisashi was of the branch family. And as such, his nephew had grown to hate and resent him and his family, even if they were indeed related, and that hatred grew when Hisashi took his place when he had killed the ninja that tried to kidnap Hinata. To see that Neji was very talented and strong was a great surprise to Hisashi, and to see him defeated by Naruto, and where Naruto told him that fate can be changed and to quit thinking that everything is predestined, gave him the chance to finally tell Neji the truth of why his father died. He couldn't blame Neji for not believing him when he gave his nephew his father's last letter before he died, and how he might harbor hatred still. But his defeat by Naruto's hands and the truth of his father's choice made Neji change, and for the first time, Hisashi chose to train Neji himself, and as head of the Hyuga family, he had the authority to do so as well. And when he had a chance to speak to Neji after he recovered with his battle with the Sound Village ninja Kidomaru, who had discovered the Byakugan's weakness and nearly killed him, he was impressed that Neji confessed that he now understood what it was for his teammate Rock Lee, for Hinata, and for Naruto to face a foe who was stronger and deadlier than them. If it hadn't been for his defeat by Naruto, who told him that anyone could change their destiny, and himself realizing that he had to truly prove that the Hyuga clan was the best of the best in Konoha and that he still had the chance to win, he admitted that he would have truly died that day. It was Naruto who took him out of the darkness of his own making and made him see the light and break his own cage. In all that, Hisashi knew that he truly owed Naruto Uzumaki a great deal of thanks for all he had done for his family, for his daughter, and his nephew as well. That was why he was hoping that when the storms passed over Konoha, he and the others would go out and find them both. Master Hisashi. Hisashi turned and spotted Neji as he arrived in the courtyard. The Jonin sat down next to his uncle, and Hisashi spoke to his nephew. "You don't need to call me that here, Neji. I'm sorry, uncle, I guess it's an old habit. That's all right. Any new word on when the storm clears?" Neji sighed and gave his uncle the bad news so far. "There's been no change, I'm afraid to say. The storms are still keeping the ships in port, including the one that Tsunade-sama had charted for the rescue operations. It might take another day or more before we can find them." "I see. Then we must wait. Both Hinata and Naruto are stronger than they were back then, Neji. You and I both know that they will be all right." Neji nodded as he looked at the rain. Both uncle and nephew took the time to contemplate their own thoughts, until Neji decided to ask a question, which in his mind was of great importance. Like all the others, he knew about his cousin's deep-seated affection for Naruto, and while he didn't find anything wrong with them being close, he wondered how his uncle and Hinata's father would react if ever Hinata and Naruto would. As much as he discounted the notion of that ever happening considering Hinata's innate shyness, and Naruto's obliviousness, he wanted to know either way on what his uncle's reaction should be if it did happen. Uncle, I'd like to ask you something. Go ahead, Neji. Well, I assume that you are aware of Hinata's, infatuation with Naruto. Hiashi broke a rare smile at that remark and that surprised Neji as well, and he replied. Of course I have been aware of Hinata's crush on him. I've known for a very long time. Why do you ask? Well, I know this might sound, offensive. But if anything were to happen between Naruto and Hinata, would you approve of it? Hiashi couldn't help himself but smile at the idea. That was a very interesting question that his nephew put before him, and naturally he deserved to answer it as well. Hinata is her own person now, Neji, just as you are your own person as well. If that does happen, as long as Hinata is happy, then she has my blessing. Neji nodded and smiled at the thought. He had to admit that he was dying to see just how things would go between his cousin and her crush. By the way, Neji. Yes, uncle. How is your relationship with Tenten going? I heard that you actually asked her out on a date before all this happened. Is that date still going to happen? Now it was Neji's turn to blush. In the Ichiraku ramen stand. The business was rather slow today as Tuki and Ayame looked on at the rain that continued to fall down around the street that they had set up shop for a very long time. It's really depressing that Naruto's not around, isn't it? Ayame missed the young ninja and she hoped that as soon as the storms passed, the village could go out and try and find him and Hinata as well. She missed the young man's antics and his patronage of their ramen shop. Yes, I really miss him here. The place seems too dull without him around. Tuki said as he missed the young ninja and his antics, not to mention the fact that he was their best customer. Konohamaru and his teammates were here frequently for the past 2 days, hoping to hear news of Naruto from the two, and even Ebisu, Konohamaru's ninja sensei, was concerned about the news as he knew how much the grandson of the deceased third Hokage respected the loudmouth ninja. I hope they'll be found and that the gods would soon move this weather. Ayame said, and then Tuki smiled as he had a plan. When he gets back here, I'm going to give him a very special treat. Just for that day of his return, we'll let him have all that he wants from the menu for free. In Kurenai's home, Yuhi Kurenai looked at the rain and wondered how her student Hinata was doing, and she hoped that the young Chunin was safe and sound. The red-eyed Kunoichi walked over to the picture she had with her students on her desk. In the picture was her standing behind Kiba, Shino, and Hinata, and smiled a bit as she recalled their times together. Normally she would be helping them when they were together, but with her son growing in her belly she had to take the time off as she needed to be ready soon when the baby would be born. At least Hinata would have a good friend to keep an eye on. She always had a soft spot for Hinata after she had been charged by Hiashi to take care of Hinata, and it did her heart good that both Hinata and her father were now on better terms with one another, and she was very supportive of her student's longtime crush on Naruto. She knew how great an influence the blonde ninja was for her student and how much Hinata liked him. To her it was very nice to see and know that Hinata was happy. Like all the other adult ninja, she knew about Naruto having the Kyuubi inside of him, and while she too had a very healthy amount of fear of the Biju in the boy, she saw things differently. Naruto was at first a clown, but after seeing him defeat Kiba, her opinion changed, and also his support for Hinata was very much welcome, and witnessing him defeat Neji with the Kyuubi's chakra without becoming a monster was a great sign, plus the other times she had known the blonde ninja. She however had another very good reason to be very supportive of Hinata's crush on Naruto. In her youth, she had a strong affection for the Yondaime when he was still alive then, and she had even been like Hinata when she once asked him out, but he had already been reported to have been married at the time, and while it made her sad, this allowed her to meet Asuma. Asuma was not a perfect guy, not like the Yondaime in her mind, but he was nice, despite his habit of smoking. She was sad when she heard that the Yondaime died and she met Naruto for the first time when he was a child. She was able to notice physical similarities between the young boy and the Yondaime, and when she saw him in battle, there was something about his ways of fighting that made her recall the Yondaime, and the fact that the Yondaime was married. Naruto may not be a total genius like the Yondaime, but he had heart and compassion and in the same way as the Yondaime himself, and that made her wonder if Naruto was the Yondaime's son. She had asked Asuma's father, the third Hokage, about this fact, but Sarutobi replied with a smile that she should decide for herself what she thought and not let an old man's words be the base for her to decide on. That in her mind was enough to tell her that her thoughts on the Yondaime being Naruto's father were dead on. In truth, it was understandable that no one else might know that Naruto was the Yondaime's son. The Yondaime, Namikaze Minato, was quite the legend and was the greatest ninja of Konoha of his time and made many enemies. If they ever found out he had a family, there would be no end to the number of enemies that would try and kill them. And being the kind-hearted, compassionate, and selfless man that he was, the Yondaime would have wanted nothing to hurt his village or his family. That was why she supported Hinata in the Hyuga era's attempts to get closer to Naruto. Besides, the young woman would have made worse if she tried to have a crush on others anyway. She couldn't help but hope that Hinata was alright and that someday, she would finally be able to tell Naruto how much she felt about him. In the Yamanaka flower shop, Sakura and Ino were looking at the rain, along with their other comrades, Tenten, Rock Lee, Kiba, Shino, Shikamaru, Choji, and even for once, Sai as well. They were still wondering when they would be able to go out and find the two of their group of friends. They each had been very busy with their chores when they got word that Naruto and Hinata was lost in a storm at sea. The second Sakura heard that, she became very worried for her teammate and friend, as she and Naruto had gotten closer ever since they began to work together again. It was a bit hard for her to imagine Naruto being helpless, but she was not going to let any harm come to Naruto ever since she knew his secret. She had always wondered why he was treated differently and with such disdain and hatred by others, even when she was young, after knowing what happened to him and his show of his emotional state during the mission to rescue Gaara before he was resurrected and afterwards. She may draw the line at his perverted side while denying her own, but when it concerned the dangers of him being killed by Akatsuki for the Kyuubi sealed inside of him and losing her best friend, she was not going to stand by and do nothing. With that in mind, Sakura began to pace, and while the others understood her state of mind, they were getting rather distracted as Sakura continued to pace in the flower shop back and forth over and over again for the next few minutes. Even Shino was getting distracted. Ino naturally decided to get into the act and speak to her friend. Sakura, calm down, pacing back and forth isn't going to help, you know. I know, it's just, I can't stand doing nothing here. Naruto's out there along with Hinata and lost at sea. God only knows what's happening to them out there. I really worried right now. Worried about them. Hinata and Naruto will be fine. Naruto's certainly changed a great deal since I saw him take down that Akatsuki guy with that new jutsu of his, plus he's been trained really hard, you know. He'll be fine, and so will Hinata. She's a lot stronger than she was before, you know. Sakura sighed at that and looked at Ino, who was close to Sai, and she naturally replied. I know that, but that certainly doesn't make things easier. Naruto might still be the same, but he has grown up a lot from the old Naruto we all knew back in the academy, you know. The others nodded at what Shikamaru said, as they all knew just how different Naruto was now from before. However, it still made them wonder that if Naruto and Hinata were still safe and alive, what exactly was happening to them right now. The only one who naturally didn't know anything about the Hyuga era's longtime crush on the blonde ninja was naturally Sai, since he was not from the Rookie 9 group that made up Shikamaru, Sakura, Choji, Ino, Kiba, Shino, Sasuke, and naturally Naruto and Hinata. The only one to bring it up was naturally one of them, namely Ino. Do you guys think that maybe Hinata might finally, well, you know, tell Naruto about her long-time crush on him? The others looked at the blonde Kunoichi with some surprise, and then, the gloomy atmosphere was replaced by smirks and chuckles at the thought of what was happening right now with Naruto and Hinata. The only one who didn't understand was Sai, and he naturally decided to find out just what they were talking about. What does that mean? And why would Hinata, who's the Hyuga clan heiress, have a crush on Naruto? Does she intend to hurt him in some way? The others looked at him with some surprise, and Sakura decided to explain to her teammate Sai just what was it they were talking about, just in case Sai got the wrong impression about Hinata. Hinata likes Naruto, ever since she first lay eyes on him back in our academy days and all the way to now, and she likes him, however she's too shy to say anything to him about it, no matter how many hints she sends his way. I don't know exactly why he doesn't notice. Maybe because he only has eyes for Sakura. Kiba said as he patted Akamaru's head. Ino had allowed the massive dog into her family shop as long as Akamaru didn't suddenly shake his fur and soak them with the remaining water on his body. The others noted Kiba's comments and also noted that, while Sakura sighed as well. She knew that Naruto really liked her, but she doubted that there would be a relationship between them. There was a lot of history between them, and she knew that she couldn't look at Naruto that way, not after how she used to treat him. She preferred it better that Hinata and Naruto were the ones who got together, since Hinata really liked Naruto. I don't think we'd get along well. Ino raised an eyebrow at that statement and shook her head. How can you say that, Sakura? Since compared to how you two used to get along in the past, that is when you're not angry with him, you two seem to get along just fine, a lot better if I might add. Sakura sighed and replied at her friend's words. Maybe because I guess that since he never talks to me like the old days, the way he used to anymore, then it's a sign that part of him is giving up on me. But I think that we will always be friends, but I think, not in the way that Naruto might want us to be. The others thought about that and decided to drop the topic about the relationship between Sakura and Naruto, seeing as it was not going to be something they were willing to talk about themselves. However, that certainly didn't mean that they were not going to talk about the relationship between Naruto and Hinata, as they each traded stories on the subject. Kiba and Shino would talk about their missions with Naruto and Hinata in company, and even Sakura would trade one of her own, that is until Sai decided to ask. I was reading a book made by Jiraiya that mentioned something like this, so do you think that Naruto and Hinata Hyuga would, what's that word again, go to the bedroom and... Sai barely got the words out when Sakura, in a look of absolute shock, reached out and covered his mouth, but her actions were too late, as everyone in the shop apart from Sai knew what that meant, as they all began to smirk, grin, blush, giggle, and eventually all of them began to laugh, and they talked about how that would happen and what would happen between Naruto and Hinata. Sakura sighed and called their attention with a glare, and she then replied. There is no way that it will ever happen between those two. But wouldn't it be nice, Sakura? I mean, we all know how much Hinata would love to finally be alone with Naruto, and who knows what can happen. Sakura sighed and glared at the smiling duo of Ino and Tenten as she wondered at the possibility of it really happening, but she still had her doubts. Apart from the elders of the village, including Hinata's father and Neji's uncle, Tsunade, the Anbu, Kakashi, Yamato, Shizune, the Sand siblings Tamari, Kankuro, and Gaara, and herself, no one else knew about Naruto being the container of the Kyuubi. She made a pledge to never reveal it to anyone in her circle of friends and comrades, and to Hinata herself. She was afraid that if Hinata ever found out about Naruto's burden, she would be terrified of him and would do something that would really cause harm in Naruto's life. Though she doubted that Hinata would ever actually do that, she couldn't deny the possibility, and she shivered mentally at the thought of how the others would react if they found out. She only hoped that there would be time for Hinata to be properly told about her crush's hard secret, or else, who knew what could happen. Speaking of which, back on the island, Naruto was currently waiting in the cave to make the sleeping fire for himself and Hinata, and he had already taken care of the fuel for the signal fire. And they had been able to cook and eat their dinner after training once more after lunch. As he got the fire working with the flint and his kunai, he then began to think on how he would be able to tell Hinata about his long-hidden secret. But he was afraid, He had been able to see glimpses of the woman before him for the past few days, and he was afraid that if he did tell her about his secret, then she would be scared and terrified of him, and hate him. But he decided to just get it over and done with, since he knew that if he didn't tell her himself, then sooner or later, someone who knew about his status as a Jinchuriki would twist the truth to Hinata, and when she did find out it was true, he didn't even want to guess what could happen. As Hinata came into the cave, he waited for her to sit down on their bedding, and he decided to ask her the question that he knew would make Hinata very embarrassed, but he had to know her true feelings before he committed himself to tell her his own secret. Hinata. Why? Yes, Naruto-kun. I want to know something. And if you don't want to answer me now, then you can answer me some other time when you are finally comfortable enough to tell me. Are you ready? I guess so. Naruto took a deep breath and calmed himself and asked Hinata the question. Do you like me? Hinata blushed bright red at that and felt her heart race, as she never expected Naruto to suddenly ask her such a question. She had been hoping for the chance to tell him how she felt about him when she had the courage, but now he wanted to know her feelings towards him. She felt as if she was about to faint once more, but she decided to calm herself and began to speak. Why? You are important to me, Naruto-kun. Please. I have to tell him now. I might never get another chance. I must not faint. I always watched you when we were in the academy, when we were still genin. And I always admired you so many times. I really felt you were going to be a great ninja someday. And I always liked you, Naruto-kun. For a very long time, I liked you. Actually, I more than like you, I guess. What do you mean? Say it. Before Hinata could say it, Naruto finished it for her. Her words, plus all the times he recalled when he was with her in their earlier years and the times they had together, now told him what he wanted to know. You love me. Hinata nearly lost her consciousness and gulped loudly as she twiddled her fingers, and she felt that she was going to faint as she decided to say it once and for all. I do. Naruto looked at Hinata, stunned that the truth finally came out and what the Kyuubi had told him was true. Hinata Hyuga was in love with him, and she had just told him that in this place. All the times she had been kind to him were now making sense, and he felt relieved that he knew the truth about why she was always being kind and supportive of him, and why she was always this way with him when he was near her. Now came the moment he dreaded, to tell her about the Kyuubi. Hinata, I thank you for telling me the truth. I know, it feels better now that I've told you about how I feel, Naruto-kun. Hinata wiped the tears in her eyes that threatened to fall as she thought she would cry at finally telling her crush, and now her object of affection, about how much she loved him. But I don't think that you would want me. But I do love you. I really do. I'm not lying about that. I know, you could never lie to me, but I want to tell you something that might change your mind about me. What do you mean? Hinata, do you know about the Kyuubi? Hinata knew about the nine-tailed fox and how it had attacked Konoha years ago. She had been only a baby at the time and had heard stories about how the beast killed many of the people in Konoha and nearly wiped the village out. The Kyuubi was nearly able to destroy Konoha had it not been for the Yondaime and his noble sacrifice of sealing the Kyuubi and giving up his life. Then the village of Konoha would have been wiped out, but what does that have to do with Naruto? I know that it nearly wiped out the village years ago, but that is it. Naruto gulped and spoke slowly as he recalled the time he found out the truth about himself. Hinata, did you ever wonder why the villagers hated me and treated me the way they did? I did before, but why did they do that? Why did they hate you? Because Hinata, the Kyuubi was sealed in a male baby in order to stop its rampage in Konoha, and that baby grew up to be treated like a monster, like the Kyuubi, though no one told others why. Do you understand me now? Hinata didn't understand it at first and was very much confused, But when she began to recall how others would look at Naruto and she could hear their whispers and comments about him, it didn't take long for the Hyuga girl to put two and two together and realize just why Naruto said that he would tell her something that would make her change her mind. Naruto-kun, you were that, baby. Naruto nodded slowly as he placed his hand on his stomach, the same place where the nine-tailed fox resided in his body. And he continued to speak to Hinata. I found out about it when I was fooled by Mizuki to steal the sealing scroll. I was angry when he told me about using me to steal the scroll for his own ends. Uruka-sensei, who tried to help me, tried to stop Mizuki from telling me about, but that traitor did it anyway. I was hurt and angry. But I was saved and I decided to live with it. But so many people still hated me. I wanted to tell you this before you found it out in another way and would be lied to. I can understand if you want to leave and be on the other. Hinata, however, was having none of it as she tackled Naruto and instead of hurting the blonde ninja, looked at him straight in the eyes. And kissed him. Naruto looked at Hinata with absolute shock. The blonde shinobi had expected her to run away from him in fear, and fight him, but not this. He was not expecting to be suddenly knocked down and kissed by the dark-haired and white-eyed girl. He couldn't help but react as he slowly stopped resisting and kissed Hinata back. Hinata was shocked by what she learned about Naruto and she could understand why he said that she would change her mind about him. But she was not going to change her mind. Naruto may have the Kyuubi inside of him, but he was not the Kyuubi. Naruto was a human being and he had a heart and he had emotions, and he was a person who was strong and brave. He had done so much and he was kind, compassionate, and gentle. He was not a demon in her eyes. No matter what, she saw him for who he was, and that was a great ninja, a great friend, a great ally, and her beloved. The truth about him may have caught her by surprise, but she was not going to change her mind about Naruto, her Naruto-kun. As she broke the kiss, Naruto tried to speak to her. Hinata, why are you? Because I love you, Naruto-kun, and I mean it. But what about? You may have the Kyuubi inside of you, Naruto-kun, but you are not the Kyuubi. You are you, no one else. I love you for who you are then, and I love you for who you are now. The truth may complicate things, but I won't change how I feel about you, Naruto-kun. I love you now and always. Please say that you love me too. Naruto couldn't help but blush and feel his heart beat even faster as he could see and hear the truth in Hinata's words. She loved him, even if the Kyuubi was inside of him, she still loved him, and the feelings that simple truth had unleashed were amazing to him. And this time he was confident of his answer. I love you too. Naruto-kun. Naruto then smiled with a perverted style. And I'm going to prove it too. It's time, ladies and gentlemen. Naruto got up and both he and Hinata sat on their bed covered with the soft and sweet-smelling leaves, which they covered with rabbit skins that they were able to sew together with thin but strong fiber in their kunai. He looked at her and marveled at the coppery hue the fire gave her and made her eyes glow. With that in her blush, he reached out and kissed Hinata gently and slowly. This made Hinata moan as she began to kiss him back with equal fervor. The Hyuga girl couldn't help but feel her body become alive as she savored the taste and feel of her beloved's lips on hers. She had dreamed of doing this for a very long time, and now her dreams were coming true. Naruto had been reading a lot of things about and love making, and in fact, he might not have told anyone this, but he had been able to finally get enough material on how to actually make love to a woman, but he kept in mind that while he had some idea on how it was done, he wanted this to be perfect between him and Hinata as she was his girlfriend now, and they were going to make love to one another. In truth, he had dreamed of doing this with Sakura, but now, it seemed to be more right to him to be doing this with Hinata. Their chaste kissing grew in intensity and soon, they began to kiss each other more intensely and Hinata shyly responded as she slowly opened her mouth to Naruto's gentle prodding, and when she did, he opened his mouth as well. The Kyuubi container then slowly licked her teeth, making Hinata moan, and when Naruto placed his tongue into her mouth gently tempting her to do the same, she nearly fainted on the spot. Hinata slowly moved her own tongue, and the moment her tongue touched Naruto's, both of them moaned out as they tasted and touched each other, and when they slowly began to deeply kiss each other, they both got an idea of what they would be doing soon enough, as their deep kissing and tasting of each other was already qualifying as an act on its own. As they broke their kiss, they began to slowly disrobe one another, with Naruto removing Hinata's jacket and Hinata removing Naruto's own jacket as well. They did so and then removed their inner clothes, with Naruto managing to find the special latch that held the upper portion of Hinata's body suit together with the lower piece. It didn't take very long for the two ninja to finally be able to see each other. And they both liked what they saw. Hinata blushed brightly as she looked at her love's body and admired the muscles that were in his body. She looked at his face first, marveling his sky blue eyes and the strong but handsome features on his face. Even the whisker-like marks on his cheeks didn't detract his features in the least in her eyes. Her gaze traveled down to his chest and torso, marveling at the muscles she saw there, testament to the years of training that her long-time crush and love had been through all his life. She then admired the muscles in his arms and then his hands, relishing the thought of them touching her now form. She then looked at the seal that showed to her where the nine-tailed fox was contained and wasn't afraid of it at all. In fact, when she looked at it, it made her admire how brave and strong Naruto was for bearing the burden that he had been given as a baby. Naruto also blushed as he was now able to see Hinata, and it was quite the sight as he took in the smooth and soft cream-white look of her skin. There were some scars here and there, but they hardly detracted the picture of female beauty before him as he stared at her face, the smooth and soft lines of her features and her eyes with the Byakugan, and her dark long hair. His gaze went lower to her chest and he admired her. They were larger than when he saw them in her clothes, and Naruto admitted that given a few years, Hinata would have been a bit of a match for Tsunade. Her however were firm looking and her deep pink looked hard and very tempting to the male ninja, and he looked to her lower form, admiring the smooth and flat look of his beloved's tummy. Naruto then reached out and touched Hinata's face gently, running his hands on the smooth lines of her jaw, and then moved his hands to her neck, admiring the smooth softness of her skin and that the feel of her body was very nice. He reached her and blushed as she reached out to feel the fleshy orbs, and he was in awe at how soft yet firm Hinata's were as he touched them. Hinata moaned loudly as she felt his hands on her. Truth be told, she was a bit worried about her as they had become rather large, and she was a bit afraid that they would attract too much attention towards her and she would be in trouble. However, the way Naruto touched her and the way he seemed to love touching them made her realize that maybe she shouldn't worry too much about them. Naruto-kun likes them, so I guess they're all. Oh. On Naruto-kun. Hinata's reaction was obvious as Naruto leaned forward, knocking her back into their mattress of leaves and rabbit skins, and he was now kissing and sucking her, while holding, touching, and massaging them with absolute gentleness and passion, and the feelings of her love's hot mouth and tongue on her, and, with his hands touching them, made the Hyuga heiress moan and cry out at the sensations as she ran her hands on his back, feeling the muscles in her hands. Naruto loved the feel of Hinata's skin and he loved the feel of her soft body underneath his a lot. He looked at Hinata as she looked back at him with love and desire in her eyes. He smiled back and continued to worship her, starting with her right, making Hinata hold him to her tight as she didn't want to lose the feelings he was sending throughout her body, and she was loving it all. She felt that all of her dreams and hopes had led to this one night here on this island, and she was not going to give up now. Naruto then gave the same loving treatment to Hinata's left, further making the Hyuga heiress making moaning and mewling sounds that served to make Naruto even more aroused as he felt his in his pants harden even more. As soon as he was done, he gave a parting kiss and licked to both her and traced his tongue and lips on her smooth lower torso, but he also ran his hands on her body slowly, loving the feel of her smooth skin. He reached the waist of her pants and lower body suit, and with patience and a bit of fumbling, he with Hinata's help managed to remove her pants, sandals and her body suit, and he smirked as he saw the black panties that Hinata wore. He smiled at his lover and replied, "Why, Hina-chan, I didn't know you wore such naughty clothes." Naruto-kun. Naruto merely kissed her as he gently reached out and removed her panties, taking into account that her panties were already wet, telling him that she was already wet in her. He looked at her most private place, but then Hinata's shyness came back as she covered her with her hands. PPP please, don't look at me like that there. I'm so embarrassed. Naruto was sorely tempted to grab her hands and push them aside, but he didn't as much as he did hear about Jiraiya's perverted antics. He knew better than to force Hinata and therefore he patiently replied to her. You don't need to be embarrassed. You are so beautiful already Hina-chan, you don't need to hide yourself from me. Hinata gulped and slowly removed her hands and closed her eyes, hoping not to further embarrass herself before Naruto. However, she gasped and saw that Naruto was touching her with his hands and he smiled at what he saw. Naruto-kun. Ah. Hinata moaned out loud as Naruto's hands parted her lips slowly as he inspected his first ever female vagina and he marveled at what he was looking at and before he could help himself, he picked up the sweet smell of Hinata's juices and before he could stop himself, the urge to taste her juices hit him and he went forward and licked her, making Hinata scream out. Realizing that he might have gone too far for the Hyuga heiress, he stopped and apologized to her. I'm sorry. I guess I went too far this time. No, you just surprised me Naruto-kun. Please, do it again. Are you sure? Yes. Naruto nodded and then went to trying out what he read in the books as he went back to licking and sucking on Hinata's and he loved the moans and groans Hinata was giving out as he continued to taste her. He enjoyed the feel of her soft and wet and then found her. He recalled all that he had learned in the books and touched Hinata's gently. Hinata cried out and she struggled a bit as the feelings her Naruto-kun gave her were driving her crazy. This went on for quite a while until Naruto pushed his tongue past her inner lips and straight into her inner sheath. That was enough to drive Hinata over the edge as she had her orgasm. Naruto-kun. Hinata arched her body upwards as she felt her body's release and she felt like she was flying into the sky or floating in a pool of warm energy. She felt more alive than anything as she relaxed and fell back on the mattress and began to pant and gasp as she began to recover. Naruto was nearly overwhelmed when Hinata came as her juices flowed out of her. He lapped up as much as he could and loved the sweet taste of her juices. He then looked at Hinata as she was covered in a thin sheen of sweat caused by her orgasm. The look of Hinata on their mattress with the light from the fire giving her a glow in her face in pleasure was an image Naruto was not going to forget anytime soon. In the cage where he was imprisoned inside the young ninja, the Kyuubi couldn't help but look on as he was watching the whole event with a very interested eye. He was sorely tempted to go into this and get involved, but decided not to, out of respect for the couple. Besides, just because he was not in control of Naruto's body, it certainly didn't mean he couldn't feel the sensations and emotions the two were radiating. Damn, finally I get to see and feel some action for a change. Naruto smiled as he saw Hinata open her eyes and she was looking at him in a very shy smile as she slowly got up and kissed him, unmindful of the fact that her juices were on his lips. Hinata did know, but didn't seem to mind as she kissed Naruto deeply. It was then that she pushed him down and then began to take off his pants, sandals and then his boxers, revealing his to the warm air. Hinata blushed as she looked at Naruto's manhood. As apparently, the whisker marks and fox-like mannerisms were not the only things the Kyuubi imparted on its container. Hinata might have never seen one in the past 16 years of her life before, at least if you count the times when she was still little and they didn't count. She marveled at the fact that Naruto's was at a whooping 9 inches. More than enough for a teen his age and more than good in fact. She blushed brightly as she slowly but surely ran her hands over the organ and she stopped a bit when Naruto gasped, thinking that she might have hurt her loved one somehow. She began to apologize, the very same way he did when he thought he was being too forward with her. Sorry Naruto-kun. No, it's all right, I was just surprised. You can go ahead Hina-chan. Hinata smiled and slowly began to run her hands over the long and rather thick, amazed at the length and width of it and marveled at how hard it was and the skin was yet so soft and smooth, and she could see the veins as well. She then reached the head of her loved ones and couldn't help but admire the deep red tip and its softness. She then had an idea, as she had heard about this before being done by some of the women when they were intimate with their boyfriends or husbands. She didn't know if Naruto would like it, but she was willing to try anything now to please Naruto and make him happy. Naruto was in heaven as he felt Hinata's hands slide over his with a gentleness and touch that made him ache with want, but he was content to let Hinata go at her own pace. He looked at Hinata and his eyes bugged out as she suddenly began to lick his at the shaft, and before he could even utter a sound or ask what she was doing, the sensation of her tongue licking his made him howl out in pleasure and surprise. Hinata continued her actions, making Naruto moan out and offer his pleasure, making her even more determined to make him feel happy. She licked his from base to tip and even kissed it gently, and while she was not very sure about how to really do it and therefore was only doing things on trial and error, Naruto was certainly not going to complain. She then took the tip of his and slowly began to kiss and lick it, as well as suck on it. Hinata then recalled what else she heard and then relied on that as she slowly began to take in her lover slowly into her mouth and began to slowly move up and down as she was able to take as much as she could. This went on for a few minutes as Naruto screamed out his pleasure as Hinata began to pick up the pace. Hinata was careful as she did this, and while she couldn't take all of it in, she was content as she heard the cries of pleasure from her loved one as she continued to bob her head slowly up and down. So it was natural that since the two of them were virgins, one of them in this point and situation had to give as Naruto finally released his seed into Hinata's mouth, and Hinata likewise felt the twitching of her lovers in her mouth, and then she felt his seed hit the roof of her mouth and the back of her throat, and the streams kept on coming as she took in as much as she could manage without choking and moved back, but several more streams landed on her face and some dripped down to her. She then tried Naruto's taste and noted a sweet and slightly salty mix, no doubt from all his years of eating ramen and other types of food that managed to get his attention, and there was a slight tingly sensation she felt when she tasted it, and she loved the taste as well. It was the taste of her loved one after all, and with that in mind, she took it in. And noting the seed on her face and on her, she decided to take it all in with her fingers and did so, all the while unaware that her Naruto-kun was watching the whole time. Naruto managed to recover due to his massive reserves of stamina and chakra so as to apologize to Hinata for not being able to warn her about his coming release, but the second he saw Hinata swallowing his cum, he was unable to think straight, and when she smiled and began to clean herself with her hands took in his seed. He felt like his brain had just stopped working and his was now back at full mast. Wow. Naruto-kun, you taste. Was it bad? If it was no, I like it. Both lovers then held each other tight and Hinata blushed as she could feel Naruto's poking her stomach, and when she looked at him, he looked back and they kissed each other. Naruto didn't mind the taste and so did Hinata as they began to kiss, touch, caress and lick one another. This went on, until Naruto then looked at Hinata, wordlessly telling her that it was now time for them to finish this. Hinata nodded as she lay back on the mattress and opened her legs gently, allowing Naruto to get into position between her legs. He used his hand to guide his to her and he rubbed his on her lips and, making Hinata moan, and she begged for him to place it in before she would faint from the pleasure of it all. Naruto nodded and with some effort and patience was now ready. With a gulp, he slowly began to push into Hinata's and Hinata gasped as she felt the tip of Naruto's member enter her most sacred place, and she gasped once more as it passed her outer lips and into her sheath. Like all kunoichi in training, Hinata had broken her maidenhead at some point in her life and therefore, didn't have that to prove her being a virgin, but she had never had in her entire life, and today was the day she was having it, and with the man she had dreamed countless times of being with as well. Therefore, it was hardly surprising that it was a very snug and tight fit once Naruto was inside. The blonde ninja was amazed that he was able to bury his entire length fully inside Hinata, and Hinata herself never felt so full and gasped as she tried to get used to the sensations. NN Naruto-kun, you're so big. Hina-chan, you're so wet, tight, I've never felt anything like this, it's amazing. Hinata gasped as Naruto managed to push all of his length into her, and then the blonde ninja waited as Hinata got used to his size. And once he was sure that she was comfortable, he slowly began to pull out of her, and Hinata gasped at the delicious sensations that once more assaulted her senses as she felt her inner walls caress Naruto's length. She wanted to feel every sensation as the feelings ran into every corner of her nerves, and she felt the sensations from her to her toes, her fingers, and even the roots of her hair. Naruto pulled out as much as he could, and once his tip was in Hinata's, he pushed right back in until he was touching Hinata's womb. The dark-haired Kunoichi cried out at the sensation of being filled to the brim once more, and that was when Naruto began to establish a rhythm for his thrusts into Hinata's wet. As he began to thrust slowly into her, Hinata felt her body begin to tingle and grow even more sensitive to the heat and the sensations that flooded her mind and body. As for Naruto, the feel of Hinata's wetness, tightness, and softness was so powerful that he nearly blacked out at the feelings that flooded both his body and his mind as he continued on with his actions. Hina-chan, you feel so, oh. Naruto-kun. Harder. More please. The two ninjas began to moan into each other's ears as Naruto got closer to Hinata and used all of his stamina as he continued to thrust into Hinata to bring them both their release, and they both were enjoying it without restraint, and that was a good thing for the two of them as they held each other tightly and they began to shout and groan as Naruto picked up the pace of his thrusts and then worshipped Hinata's with kisses, a few licks with his tongue, making Hinata cry out her pleasure. The two then kissed each other deeply, and when they moaned together as Naruto's thrusts grew in speed and power. And the cave was filled with the sounds of their wet flesh hitting each other along with the erotic sounds of their love-making. Oh 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 h h h h h h. More. Naruto-kun. Ah. Hina-chan. So hot, so tight. The two of them wanted this very moment to last forever and ever, as long as they were alive, as they continued to shout and moan their pleasure to each other. But everything has an end, as they both of them were now reaching their climaxes, and they both made that fact very clear to one another. I'm going to come. Naruto-kun. Me too, Hina-chan. Both hit their orgasms at the very same time as they shouted their joys. Hinata cried out as she felt the very first stream of Naruto's seed hit her inner walls, and the feeling of it was very much like a bolt of pleasurable energy was flowing into her, along with a feeling of great comforting warmth that flowed through every part of her body. The first jet of Naruto's seed into her hot was followed by yet more, and she felt her milk her lovers to take as much of it as it could handle into it. Naruto likewise was in ecstasy as he felt his release, and the feel of Hinata's inner walls caressing his was exquisite as he continued to release his seed into her womb. The feel of the soft, wet, and tight walls milking his was so wonderful he was about to faint. Naruto, however, knew that until things were straightened out, he couldn't afford to have Hinata pregnant. Therefore, he learned a trick to make his seed unable to be fertile using his chakra, for the sake of safety. As he did so, he slowly began to pull out of his love, and a long trail of seed followed a bit as he lay beside Hinata, who was breathing slowly in and out. The two lovers looked at one another and cuddled closely as Hinata decided to ask him something. How did you move on when you found out about the Kyuubi, and Naruto-kun? I have Iruka-sensei to thank, along with Sakura-chan, Kakashi-san, and even Sasuke, because they are all good people to me. That is why I won't let Sasuke leave, and there's Tsunade-bachan, Ero-senin, Shizune-nichan, and now there's Hina-chan. Hinata blushed brightly and kissed Naruto on the cheek as she held him tightly. She was now part of the small number of people who knew him very well, and until the time came for the truth to come out, she promised to not tell anyone about Naruto's secret. He trusted her with it, and she won't break that trust for as long as she lived. Naruto smiled and held her tightly as well as the two of them slept. The next day, Tsunade was relieved to see that the clouds that had covered the skies over Konoha had just died down, and the reports of clear weather for the rest of the week was even more uplifting news as she quickly called Shizune to the office. Shizune arrived into the office with a smile on her face as the weather told her quickly what the Hokage had in mind. Yes, Tsunade-sama. Tell the boats to await our arrival to the port, I will be going along with a select band of ninja to find Naruto and Hinata. Until then I want you and Iruka to be handling things while I am gone. Yes, Tsunade-sama. The Hokage then contacted all of the ninja who she knew could help in the search, namely Neji Hyuga, his uncle Hiashi, Kiba and Akamaru, Shino and his destruction bugs, and a few others for the search. She didn't mind if several others were on the search, including Sakura as well as Yamato and Kakashi. Later, as they were all there on the boat and set sail, all of them, including Naruto's sensei Jiraiya, went to follow the route the boat that Naruto and Hinata had taken when they were lost, hoping to find them somewhere at sea. On the island, Hinata woke up with a daze and looked about. She found to her surprise that she was very much and at first wondered what had happened. Then her memories of last night came back to her and she blushed brightly once more as she realized that all of her dreams had actually come true on this island. She had finally been able to be alone with Naruto, had gotten to know him better and most of all, told him about her feelings for him and he accepted them and loved her back. She never felt so happy in all of her life and she wanted this memory to last forever. She looked at Naruto and she kissed him, and was surprised when Naruto opened his sky blue eyes and kissed her back. They both stayed there for a few more moments and then they parted and had a conversation about what to do when they were rescued. The two then got dressed and went to the river to clean up and then managed to find some more fish, berries, wild vegetables, and some rabbits for breakfast. And as Naruto was cooking, Hinata looked out with her Byakugan to see the horizon. So Kit, how was last night? The silent response from his container and the flush of embarrassment told the Kyuubi all he needed to know and he began to laugh out loud in his cage, and then Naruto responded to the laughter as he had a sneaking suspicion about the laughter the fox was making. Don't tell me you were peeping. Are you kidding me? Of course I was, and damn, who knew you had it in you? Actually, I could have given you some extra stamina for you two to go at it for another batch of rounds so I can have some entertainment apart from fighting for a change. Do you have any idea how utterly boring it is to be inside your body for 15 years and not getting the chance to have any type of action? You perverted fox. Why thank you, I haven't been called that in a very long time. But in all fairness, I'm happy for you, at least you get the girl who loves you even if I'm inside of you. You have no idea how hard that kind of person is to find in this world. You're real lucky to have her by your side. I guess you're right, and at least I've got me some good viewing material to pass the time before we get back to fighting. It'll certainly help relieve the boredom around here. Promise me one thing. That being what? Don't make a habit of recording all of the times between me and Hina-chan, okay? I can't guarantee that just yet, Kit. I happen to like this stuff, but I'd rather focus on the love sessions than all the hugging and talking. I prefer the more physical actions. Like I said, you are one perverted fox. And like I said before, thank you. Hinata looked on and scanned the horizon for any sign of ships coming in as she hoped that she and Naruto would soon be rescued, and sure enough. Naruto-kun. There's a ship out there. A really big ship. Naruto quickly put aside his cooking and rushed up and lit the signal fire, hoping that the people would see it despite the distance between them. He was in luck as another Byakugan user was on the boat as well, but in this case, there were two of them. Neji was currently scanning the horizon with his uncle Hiashi as the others were also looking about as well. On the front of the boat with the two Hyuga clan members were Jiraiya and Tsunade, along with Sakura, Kakashi, Sai, and Yamato. Neji looked and then spotted a trail of smoke from a distance. Hokage-sama. There's smoke coming from an island at the distance there. The Jonin replied as he pointed in the direction of the smoke and Hiashi confirmed it as well as he took out a map of the area they were traveling and noted that there was an island at that direction and uninhabited and unused as well. That island's unused as well, we might find them there as well. Tsunade wasted little time and ordered the captain in her loudest voice to turn in that direction. Naturally not wanting to incur the Hokage's wrath, the captain agreed as the others heard the news and decided to take a look as well. On the island, Hinata cheered as she saw the ship change direction and was heading towards them at this very moment. Naruto-kun. They see us. They're heading back here. We're saved. All right. The two hugged each other, and even though the ship was still far away, they waved towards it. And Naruto got the urge and kissed Hinata gently on the lips as well. Hinata replied with her own kiss, and when they were done, they waved once more to the ship, unaware of the fact that Neji and Hiashi had seen the whole thing. Well, well, this is certainly going to be interesting, Hiashi said with a smile. What's going on other there? Is it Naruto and Hinata on the island? Neji turned, and he was smirking and blushing at the same time, making the others look at him in confusion, Tenten Neji, urging him to tell them what he had seen. It's Naruto and Hinata-sama on the island, and they were, hugging, and last we saw, they, kissed. They did what? Jiraiya was smiling perversely as he faced Tsunade, who had a look of shock and surprise on her face. Looks like I win, Tsunade. Everyone else was in shock and surprise, and all of them were already talking about what Neji had just seen. Sakura, Kakashi, Yamato, and Sai looked at one another and tried to figure out just how to react to the news. Epilogue. Hey Naruto. Hurry up. We've gotten a lead on where Sasuke-kun is. Sakura shouted to Naruto as she spotted her teammate and his girlfriend Hinata were walking together, with him holding Hinata's groceries as they were heading back to the Hyuga residence. It did the pink-haired Kunoichi's heart good to see this, as Naruto was head over heels in love with Hinata. She was very much surprised and spoke with the two a few weeks before, and was surprised indeed when Naruto told her that he told Hinata about his secret, and even more surprised when Hinata told her that she would not tell anyone else about her Naruto-kun's secret. When she found out that Hinata and Naruto did elope, it was a bit shocking, but she was hardly envious, as she knew how much Hinata loved Naruto, and she was happy that Hinata got her wish and happy for Naruto to find someone to love. They were still friends and will always be close, and now they have another chance to bring Sasuke back, and safely as well. Hinata had changed. She still blushed and stuttered on occasion, but she was now more confident and stronger as well, and she would be there to witness Hinata and Naruto training together as well. Got it, Sakura-chan. Naruto then turned to Hinata and gave an apologetic look to his girlfriend, but Hinata smiled nevertheless and took the groceries from her boyfriend's hands and replied. No need to say anything, Naruto-kun. Go and save Sasuke-san. I'll pray for you that you and the others get back safely. Thanks, Hina-chan. Say hi to Hiashi-san and Neji for me. As Hinata watched her boyfriend leave, she smiled and headed off to her home. Hiashi and Neji were not angry with her, much to her surprise, and actually pushed her towards having a relationship with Naruto, and so were the others. And even Hanabi was supportive of her relationship with Naruto, along with the others of her family, and that made her feel that finally she had a happy life. As she walked away, she smiled at the sun and rubbed her belly, dreaming of the day that she could start her own family with Naruto.